using state authority to protect our citizens, support workers in transition.
Thank you, Chairman Downing, Vice Chairman Broder. My name is Andrew Marsh, and I'm a resident of Oxford, coming to speak in favor of Senate 1758, the act relative to the protection of propane gas ratepayers. I thank Chairman Downing for his sponsorship, as well as Representative Decker for her co-sponsorship. She's still here? Thank you, Representative Decker. I proposed this measure in a different form last year with Senator Richard Moore, and I'm glad it's being refiled this session. This measure was inspired when my sister and brother-in-law's emergency propane delivery had its price hiked by nearly 20% without having any way to know what the hike was going to be until after the tank had been filled and after the receipt was delivered to their house. I thought that wasn't right, and I was afraid of what would happen to somebody who was in that same spot and wasn't financially prepared for it. One of the most relevant questions we should be asking when we discuss this legislation is how the issue at hand, spikes in propane costs, affect the working class and low-income consumers. Well, just looking at the recent winter crisis, over the course of the peak season, propane prices on average spiked a total of 21%. To put that in perspective, the peak average was in March of last year at $3.99 a gallon. To fill a 150-gallon tank, a hike of 21% would require paying nearly $130 out of pocket to pay for the increase. Most middle-class families can only afford to put around 10% of their income into savings, and that's in the best scenario. Due to rising health care costs, housing costs, and food costs, to name a few, that percentage could easily drop. Given that the median household income is around $67,000, the average family can only put in around $560 a month in savings before taxes. An increase of 21% would wipe out nearly a quarter of that. If a consumer is part of the percentage that's living in poverty, paying that added cost would be nearly impossible. It's important to note that, as of 2014, the poverty rate in Massachusetts was 11.9%, or roughly 785,000 residents, which includes 15% of children. When taking into account additional costs like housing and food, the poverty rate hikes to 13.8%, or 910,000 residents. To put that into perspective, a household of 2 working parents and a child under those conditions makes less than $20,000 a year, or less than $500 a week. For families in poverty, rate hikes of this magnitude would push their finances further and further into the brink. Added on to the fact that these increases can come with no way of knowing what the day-to-day cost of propane will be at any given moment, this can make a bad situation worse. That's why this bill is important. It requires propane companies to post their daily propane prices on their website so that in the 21st century, every consumer can see what they could be charged and prepare for it at a moment's notice. In addition to the cost of heat, it's also important to discuss the transparency and practices of the industry in regards to how they relate to this bill. The bill also requires companies to list every fee, charge, surcharge, term, and condition clearly in the contract. The reason why this is necessary is that according to ctwatchdog.com, the propane industry is one of the least transparent energy industries in the United States. Quote, companies normally don't list their prices. They frequently won't give you a quote over the phone, and they all have different prices with different add-on charges, making comparisons impossible. End quote. This shows how the propane industry forgoes transparency in exchange for added profits, and that's not fair to the consumers who rely on propane for heat. Also, they falsely claim that owning a propane tank is more dangerous than renting one from a company. This results in only 4 to 5% of consumers actually owning and operating their own tank. If that claim was valid, then we'd be hearing more reports of propane gas tank-related accidents all over Massachusetts. But we don't hear those reports. And as a result, the industry holds a near monopoly on residential gas tanks, limiting competition and allowing them to develop rules that only allow consumers to have their tank filled by the same company that owns the tank. Last but not least, the industry is notorious for putting in hidden fees and charges that catch consumers off guard and strain their finances even more. I'd like to point to a couple of cases in Connecticut that illustrates my point perfectly. A few years ago, in 2010, a consumer had an issue with Aerogas, which has offices in Massachusetts and Rhode Island as well, when they charged her an extra $100 for conserving propane and not using a minimum amount. Also, in 2012, a consumer had problems with Amerigas, which has 2 offices in Massachusetts. In this case, after her propane tank was filled, the company locked the tank and then charged over $100 to come and unlock it. When she asked why, the serviceman told her that was standard procedure for the company. The second time it happened, Amerigas tacked on a $35 late fee to the service charge. If these conditions were listed clearly in the contract for the consumer to read before signing the dotted line, consumers would be more prepared to deal with these occurrences. Also, it could increase competition, because if one customer decides they don't like the conditions in the contract, they can look for another company that will treat them better. To conclude, this bill is common sense because it will increase transparency in the propane industry so that consumers will be protected. I'd like to point out that this bill was a compromise between my original proposal from last year and the concerns that the propane industry raised. It was reported out last year nearly unanimously. It's time to pass this measure, and I urge the committee to report out without delay. Thank you, Chairman Downey. I yield.
Thank you very much for your work. Andrew, any questions? Anything? Seeing none, we look forward to continuing to work with you on this.
Terrific job.
Thank you very much.
Next, Representative Cutler is going to bring